It's 2:30 in the afternoon, and the hearing room feels unusually full. Every seat is taken, cameras line the walls. Outside, financial networks are covering this live. Inside, the air is still. A senior Federal Reserve official sits at the witness table. He's wearing a gray suit and a blue tie. In front of him, a microphone, a binder, and a glass of water. His hands rest on either side of the binder. He hasn't opened it yet. The chairman finishes the opening remarks. Standard language about oversight, transparency, the importance of clear communication with markets. Then he yields to Representative Brooks from Connecticut. Brooks asks about recent volatility in the bond market. The official responds calmly. He says markets are adjusting to new data. He says the Federal Reserve monitors conditions closely. He says communication remains a priority. Brooks asks about inflation expectations. The official cites recent figures. He says core inflation is trending in the right direction. He says the Federal Reserve's dual mandate remains the focus. Brooks nods. He yields his time. Representative Chen from California goes next. She asks about the most recent policy meeting. The official confirms it took place 3 weeks ago. She asks if any decisions were made. He says the committee voted to hold rates steady. She asks if there was discussion about future adjustments. He says there is always discussion about the path forward. Chen asks if minutes from the meeting will be released. The official says they will be released on schedule. She asks when. He says in 2 weeks, as per standard procedure. Chen yields. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is sitting on the left side of the panel. She has a notepad in front of her, open but blank. Her pen is uncapped, resting beside the notepad. She's watching the official, but her expression is neutral. She hasn't written anything yet. Representative Martinez from Texas asks about communication protocols. The official explains that the Federal Reserve follows strict guidelines. He says all policy decisions are announced at scheduled times. He says transparency is maintained through regular press conferences and published statements. Martinez asks if there are ever unscheduled communications. The official says emergency situations may require immediate statements. Martinez asks how often that happens. The official says rarely. Martinez asks when the last time was. The official pauses, then says he'd need to check the exact date, but believes it was during the pandemic period. Martinez yields. The chairman looks at his roster. Then he says, the chair recognizes Representative Ocasio-Cortez. AOC picks up her pen. She holds it for a moment, then sets it down again without writing. She looks at the official and says, "Thank you for being here today." The official nods. "Thank you." AOC pauses. Then she says, 3 weeks ago, on October 18th, the Federal Reserve held a policy meeting. Is that correct? Yes. That meeting concluded at approximately what time? The official glances at his binder but doesn't open it. The meeting concluded around 2 p.m., and the decision was announced when? At 2:30, as scheduled. So there was a 30-minute window between the conclusion of the meeting and the public announcement. That's standard. We need time to finalize the statement and prepare for the press conference. AOC writes something on her notepad. 1 line. Then she looks up. During that 30-minute window, who had access to the decision? The committee members, of course. And essential staff preparing the release. How many staff? I don't have an exact number. Approximately. Perhaps a dozen. And these staff members are bound by confidentiality protocols. Yes, very strict protocols. AOC writes something else. Then she says, on October 18th, between 2 p.m. and 2:30 p.m., did anyone outside of the Federal Reserve have access to the decision? The official shifts slightly in his seat. No. You're certain? Yes. No briefings were given to Treasury officials? Not before the public announcement. No calls were made to the White House? Not before the announcement? No conversations with congressional leadership? No. AOC sets her pen down. She places both hands flat on the table. On October 18th, at 2:23 p.m., the bond market moved sharply. Specifically, 10-year Treasury yields dropped by 14 basis points in less than 2 minutes. Were you aware of that? The official pauses. I became aware of market movements shortly after. Yes, but it happened before the announcement. Markets can move on speculation. 14 basis points in 2 minutes. Markets are sensitive to anticipated announcements. But this wasn't speculation. This was 7 minutes before the announcement, and the movement was in the exact direction consistent with the decision that was announced. The official reaches for his water. He drinks slowly. Then he sets the glass down and says, I can't speak to individual market movements or the reasons behind them. AOC picks up her pen again. She writes another line on her notepad. The room is quieter now. Representative Brooks is leaning forward slightly. The chairman is watching AOC. AOC says, after the announcement was made, did anyone at the Federal Reserve review the trading activity that occurred before 2:30? The official says, we don't monitor individual trades, but you monitor market conditions. Yes, and you noticed the movement at 2:23. I was informed of unusual activity, yes. By whom? Market surveillance staff. And what did you do with that information? We noted it. That's all? We noted the timing and magnitude. Did you investigate? We don't have authority to investigate individual trading activity. That falls under the SEC's jurisdiction. AOC writes something else. Then she says, did you inform the SEC? The official pauses. We share information with the SEC regularly. Did you inform them about the trading activity at 2:23 on October 18th? I'd need to check our communications log. You don't remember? We have many communications with the SEC, but this was unusual activity. 14 basis points in 2 minutes, 7 minutes before a major policy announcement. And you don't remember if you informed the SEC. The official's jaw tightens slightly. I can confirm we followed appropriate protocols. AOC leans back in her chair. She's looking at her notepad now. Then she says, let me ask a different question. On October 17th, the day before the meeting, did you have any briefings scheduled? The official says, I have briefings regularly. I'm asking about October 17th specifically. I'd need to review my calendar. Your staff can provide that? Yes, please do. The official nods to someone behind him. A staff member approaches and whispers something. The official listens, then says to AOC, I had 3 briefings that day. With whom? 2 with internal staff. 1 with a Treasury official. Which Treasury official? The Deputy Secretary. What time was that briefing? Afternoon, around 4 p.m. And what was discussed? General economic conditions, coordination between Treasury and the Fed. Was the upcoming policy meeting discussed? It may have been mentioned, may have been, or was. It was mentioned, yes. In what context? In the context of general policy coordination. AOC writes something on her notepad. Then she says, did you discuss the likely outcome of the meeting? The official pauses. We discussed various economic indicators that the committee would consider, but not the likely decision. We don't preview decisions, but you discussed the indicators that would inform the decision. Yes, and what were those indicators? Employment data, inflation trends, market conditions. And based on those indicators, what direction did the data suggest? The data was mixed, but leaning in a particular direction. The official doesn't answer immediately. Then he says, the data suggested conditions were stabilizing, which would support holding rates steady. It was one interpretation, yes. AOC sets her pen down. She looks at the official. So on October 17th, you briefed the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. You discussed economic indicators, and those indicators suggested the Fed would likely hold rates steady. Is that accurate? I didn't say the Fed would hold rates steady, but the indicators suggested it. The indicators suggested stabilization, yes, and the next day the Fed held rates steady, yes, and 7 minutes before that announcement, the bond market moved as if it already knew. The official says nothing. The room is very quiet now. Someone in the back row has stopped taking notes. The cameras are completely still. Representative Chen is staring at AOC. Martinez has his hand over his mouth. AOC picks up her pen again. She holds it vertically, tip resting on the notepad. Then she says, after you briefed the Deputy Secretary on October 17th, did he leave the meeting alone? The official says, I don't understand the question. Did he go directly back to his office, or did he meet with anyone else? I don't know what he did after our meeting, but he left your office. Yes. At what time? Around 5 p.m. And you didn't see him speak to anyone as he left? I didn't monitor his movements, but there were other people in the area. It's a busy building. Were there any private sector representatives meeting with Fed officials that day? The official shifts again. We have regular consultations with market participants. On October 17th, were any private sector representatives in the building? I'd need to check visitor logs. Please do. The official nods to the staff member again. They whisper. The official listens, his face expressionless. Then he says, there were several meetings with market participants that day. How many? 4. Which institutions were represented? I'd need to provide that information in writing. Why? To ensure accuracy. AOC writes something else on her notepad. Then she says, were any of those meetings held on the same floor as your briefing with the Deputy Secretary? The official pauses. Possibly. You don't know? I don't track the physical location of every meeting, but they could have been on the same floor. Yes, at overlapping times? Possibly. AOC sets her pen down, both hands flat on the table. So on October 17th, you briefed the Deputy Secretary about economic indicators suggesting stabilization. At the same time, private sector market participants were meeting with Fed officials on potentially the same floor. The next day, 7 minutes before the announcement, the market moved exactly as if it knew what the decision would be, and you noted unusual trading activity but don't remember if you reported it to the SEC. The official says, those facts are not connected. I didn't say they were. I'm just stating what happened. Correlation doesn't imply anything. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking about timing. The official doesn't respond. AOC picks up her pen again. She writes one more line on her notepad. Then she says, let me ask about something else. Does the Federal Reserve maintain logs of communications made by committee members on meeting days? The official says, we maintain records of official communications. What about unofficial communications? Personal calls and messages are not logged. So a committee member could theoretically make a phone call during the 30-minute window between the decision and the announcement, and there would be no record of it. Committee members are bound by strict confidentiality rules, but there would be no record. They understand the rules, but there would be no record. The official's hands move from the binder to his lap. No, the chairman clears his throat. AOC glances at him, then back at the official. She says, on October 18th, between 2 p.m. and 2:30 p.m., do you know if any committee member made any phone calls? I wasn't monitoring their personal communications, but it's possible. Anything is possible, but they know the rules. So you can't confirm that no calls were made. I can confirm that all committee members are aware of confidentiality protocols. That's not what I asked. The official doesn't respond. AOC leans forward slightly. Let me ask a different question. After the unusual trading activity was noted, did anyone at the Federal Reserve conduct an internal review of who had access to the decision during that 30-minute window? The official says, we followed standard protocols. Did you conduct a review? We reviewed the timeline. Yes. And what did you find? We found that all protocols were followed. But did you identify everyone who had access to the information? Essential staff had access, as I mentioned. Did you document who those staff members were? They're part of the regular preparation team, so you have a list. We know who was involved. Can you provide that list to this committee? The official pauses. I'd need to consult with counsel about what can be shared. Why would you need to consult counsel about providing a list of staff who prepared a public announcement? Because personnel information is sensitive. We're not asking for personal details. We're asking for names and roles. I'd still need to consult counsel. AOC writes something on her notepad. The room is completely silent now. No one is moving. The official's hands are in his lap. His water glass is still half full, but he hasn't reached for it in several minutes. AOC says, let me ask about one more thing. Are you familiar with the term policy preview? The official says, yes. What does it mean? It refers to informal discussions about potential policy directions. Do those discussions happen? Occasionally, in appropriate contexts. What's an appropriate context? Conversations with Treasury, international counterparts, sometimes with congressional leadership on economic matters, but not with market participants. We're very careful about what we discuss with market participants. Careful, but do those conversations happen? We consult with market participants on general conditions. Do you ever discuss potential policy moves? We discuss economic outlooks and how policy might respond to various scenarios. Hypothetically, yes, but those hypothetical scenarios sometimes match what actually happens. If the data supports it, yes. AOC picks up her pen. She taps it once on the notepad. Then she says, on October 17th, when you met with the deputy secretary, was your discussion hypothetical or specific? The official says, we discussed the data, but data leads to conclusions. Data informs decisions, and you discussed what decision the data suggested. We discussed what the data indicated about economic conditions, which suggested a particular policy response. It suggested stabilization, which meant holding rates steady. It suggested that holding rates might be appropriate. Yes. So you did preview the likely policy decision. I discussed what the data suggested. That's not the same as previewing a decision. But the next day, the decision matched what the data suggested. That's how policy is supposed to work. And 7 minutes before the announcement, the market moved as if it already knew. The official doesn't respond. AOC sets her pen down. She closes her notepad. Then she places both hands flat on the table and says, one final question. The official waits. His expression hasn't changed, but his shoulders are slightly higher now. Tighter. AOC says, after your meeting with the deputy secretary on October 17th, how long did he remain in the building? The official says, I don't know. Did he leave immediately? I wasn't monitoring him. But the building has security logs. Yes. Can you check when he departed? The official looks at the staff member behind him. They whisper again. The room waits. 15 seconds. 20. Then the official turns back to AOC and says, according to the security log, he departed at 6:45 p.m. The room shifts. Just slightly. Someone in the back row leans forward. Representative Brooks writes something down quickly. AOC says, your meeting with him ended at 5 p.m.? Yes, and he didn't leave the building until 6:45. That's what the log shows. So he was in the building for an hour and 45 minutes after your meeting ended. Yes. Do you know what he was doing during that time? No. Do you know who he met with? No. Could he have met with the market participants who were in the building that day? I don't know, but it's possible. The official doesn't answer. AOC picks up her pen one more time. She doesn't write, she just holds it. Then she says, can you provide this committee with a full list of everyone who was in the Federal Reserve Building on October 17th between 5 p.m. and 6:45 p.m.? The official says, I can provide visitor logs. Yes. Including all meeting attendees and their affiliations. Yes. And you can cross-reference that with the institutions whose traders were active in the bond market at 2:23 p.m. the next day. The official's mouth opens slightly, then closes. Then he says, we don't have access to that trading data, but the SEC does. Yes. And you share information with the SEC. Yes. So you could request that cross-reference. The official looks at the chairman. The chairman looks back at him but says nothing. The official turns back to AOC. He says we could request it, yes. AOC nods slowly. Then she says, "Have you?" The silence is absolute. The official's hands are visible now, resting on the table. His fingers are motionless. AOC is watching him. The cameras are watching. The room is frozen, and no one says a word.